Welcome to Two Deep, Hokies Under the Influence, a Sons of Saturday podcast. I'm your host, Pete B. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see my co-host, Sam Jesse. Sam, how you feeling tonight, buddy?
I'm a little toasty tonight. It is early June here in the Tidewater, and someone's AC is out tonight. So we got the fan blasting, thunderstorm rolling in, but it's fine. We're playing through the elements tonight.
Yeah, dude, that's not a good night to have the AC. I know in Jersey, it's super swampy, so I can only imagine what the 757 is like right now. Why don't you kick us off with a cheers?
Was I just cracked one open for the cheers? My cheers is to summer. It is. I feel like June 1st is like the people start going on summer vacations. You start feeling that knack, like, I need to get to a beach somewhere. You start dressing summery. You're drinking your summer drinks. Baseball is in full swing, and it means magazine season is here, and it's no longer sicko to start craving over college football like we have been doing for the past couple months. So my cheers is to summer kicking off and college football magazine season.
Cheers, buddy. There's no reason to be down because we've still got a few months to go and we're well past spring ball. No, we are in preview magazine season, as Sam has said, and we're going to go over the Lindy's 2024 preview mag tonight, where they have the Hokies, how the ACC stacks up according to them, and just some random notes from the mag overall. I do want to start with the cool announcement we got about the Hall of Fame inductions.
Mm-hmm.
Tyrod Taylor and Dwayne Brown are getting inducted into the Virginia Tech Hall of Fame. Those are two kind of no doubters. It's almost amazing neither of them are already in. I don't know the exact rules on like how long you have to be out of school for them to be in.
Yeah, I don't know either, but two guys, Dwayne Brown, his NFL career speaks for itself. The guy is as veteran as they come, and Tyrod, I think it's safe to say he's the most accomplished starting quarterback to wear orange and maroon. So really excited that those two guys will get there, sharing the limelight in 2024. I think we'll also get a 1999 reunion game event for the Marshall games. So going to be looking back at some fond memories in 2024.
Yeah, for sure. There's several other people that got inducted. I would encourage you to go to Hokey Sports and check it out. We had some swimming and diving. We had all kinds of different sports that were honored via the inductees. I think that the longtime tennis coach is getting inducted, among others. So very, very cool. There was also something in, I think it was the Roanoke Times, that said upgrades to the football locker room should be ready by August. And that's something that I remember the whispers about it and it being budgeted for, but now apparently it's going to be done in time, and it's new showers, new toilets, sinks, cold hot tubs, a steam room, some up-to-date saunas. So that's going to be nice for the players.
Yeah, it's getting on the level of a One Life Fitness now. I'm excited.
Do you have Lifetime down near you, or
it's
is One Life like high
here.
end? Okay.
The high end is strong. I think it's something that they've needed to have for quite some time. And in the world of NIL, I think facilities has taken a back seat. But if you fall behind in facilities, you're not even going to get the conversation of NIL with some of these recruits. So locker room's a big deal. They've needed to make that for quite some time now. I think there was something about like the Edmonds brothers donating a lot in order to get that locker room. I don't know if that ever materialized or not, but
I think they have their name on some room.
On something, yeah. So anyways, I'm glad they're getting a refresh there. It was much needed.
Yeah. And finally, just a note on the football uniforms. Last episode, we talked about that maybe being released imminently. That was kind of quickly put to the side. And now it sounds like midsummer is what Witt is saying, and the traditional look and all the things that we've heard. But we're going to have to wait a few more weeks for the football uniforms, but no big deal there. Some game times. This is actually some noteworthy stuff, some real stuff here. Game times announced for 2024. We got the Vanderbilt game time. I think the boys talked about it on their show from yesterday. Noon on ESPN, but noon in Nashville is 11 a.m. their time, 12 p.m. East Coast time. So it is a morning kickoff for us.
You think it's hot in this room right now with no AC. Middle of the day in Nashville, the last day of August, is going to be toasty.
Yeah.
Feel bad for the Vandy players who are going to be wearing all black that game. That's not going to be fun.
Yeah, we are. They put out the thing on Twitter today. When I say they, I mean the Suns. That we are going to have a pregame party at Tin Roof on Friday night in Nashville. That is going to be very cool. And there's going to be T-shirts. We're going to get some ticket information out to everybody. But me and you have been discussing like maybe we should be wearing white when we're down there. If they're black and it's hot,
I think a whiteout makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So we'll workshop that a little bit more, but be ready to pack some white VT gear for the game.
Or purchase whatever shirt the Suns may be selling that could say, I think it's Nash Bash is the key phrase.
Nash Bash from Blacksburg to Broadway.
Very, very cool. I don't know who came up with that exactly, but I do like the Nash Bash vernacular. All right, Marshall game. That is at 4:30, and that's on the CW, Sam. And we'll go back to the Vanderbilt game in a second. ODU Saturday on ESPN Plus. That was do you have the time for that one?
That's a 6 o'clock.
Yeah, that's a later game.
Yeah.
And then Miami, that's of course a night game on ESPN, 7:30 on Friday night. And the BC game is the Thursday nighter, also at 7:30. But the big releases were the Vandy, Marshall, and ODU game. Are you happy about the early start time for Vanderbilt?
Well, welcome to the bottom half of the ACC, Virginia Tech. Because that noon kickoff time slot that ESPN wants for the SEC is 11 o'clock for most of the SEC schools. So I think it is one of those things that as an East Coast school, Tech is a little bit pampered with. You see the Big Ten and the SEC and occasionally the Big 12 deal with these 11 o'clock kickoffs. I mean, Texas, Oklahoma, since the beginning of time, has kicked off at 11 o'clock local time. Mm-hmm. So I think it'll be fine. These guys are college kids. Like, they don't understand clocks anyways. So I don't think it'll have like an impact on the game. I think it kind of sucks from a tailgating standpoint.
Well, yes, you will lose tailgate time.
I think Friday night will blend into the kickoff Saturday fairly easily, whether we want it to or not.
I mean, I would imagine a lot of us who are going to Nashville, me and you included, are going to be out late on Friday night, might wake up a little hungover, maybe a little inebriated still, and you just are going to roll that right into whatever tailgating or bar hopping you get into that morning, and a little bit of shampoo effect maybe. And I'm actually excited because it means, regardless of what happens in the game, whatever, the thing's going to be over 2:30, 3 p.m. local, and we'll get to hang out all afternoon on Broadway, maybe go see some things, go a little live music, whatever it may be. And so that is the cool aspect of it. Yeah, it would be nice to get more tailgate time, but let's be serious. We're not at the Grove in Ole Miss. We're not in Baton Rouge. Like, this is not a tailgating town. You want to be in bars, and hey, if I'm in the bars before and the bars after on Broadway, I'm cool with either one.
It might be the lamest area of Nashville, might be Vanderbilt's campus.
Right.
So
why spend more time there?
Exactly. Business trip mentality from Saturday morning. Get in, get out. We got an 11 o'clock meeting, get our job done, and we get out and go party after that.
Yeah. And hopefully we are partying. We discussed it a little last week about how I was maybe nervous about the Vanderbilt game. I was reading something, maybe, I guess it was in Lindy's, I don't know, but like, Pavia is not even a lock to be the starter. Like,
no, he's not. Let me flip to that page in Lindy's real quick. And we're looking at Lindy's right now. Lindy's is usually the first one to come out.
It is. Them and Athlon are very close together, but Lindy's is usually out first. I was actually impressed with the thickness of this magazine. There's a lot of pages in this thing.
Yeah, let me flip to all the way to the back to see, Vanderbilt at the back of the SEC. So right now they have Pavia, and they also have Jerry Kill coming over with him, as well as Tim Beck. So coaching wise, I think they made some good moves. But,
absolutely.
For right now, it is Pavia.
They have Pavia penciled in there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I just saw something that like it is a little bit of a competition because of whatever happened last year, and so I would we've obviously both think he's going to win the job, but if it's even up in the air a little bit, I think that's good for Virginia Tech. It means that he hasn't just grabbed it and been playing awesome.
Yeah, the other option is Nate Johnson. He started some games for Utah last year. He's extremely
Right. Wait, is that the guy who could run, or is that the pig
He's a
farmer?
runner.
Yeah,
He's the runner.
Okay.
He's really one-dimensional, and I don't think I'm the biggest Diego Pavia fan there is, maybe. The Mexican Manziel, he's amazing.
Piss and Pavia.
The Tech should have no problem with him. Like, they really shouldn't.
All right, let's talk about this. The Marshall game being at 4:30 at home for the home opener. It's on CW, whatever. A lot of our fans will be there, which is cool. But also the idea that we play at 11 o'clock week 1 and then 4:30, which isn't even really a normal NFL time. Like, those are two of the most bizarre, like, start times to start a season I can remember. So, but I do love, like, that's a lot of tailgate time at Virginia Tech to open up the season.
I think for a home game, 4:30 might be the perfect time, especially in September. It's going to be like getting a little bit dark at the end of the game. You can go out afterwards. If you're somebody who lives in Richmond or Nova, even, like, you can probably make the drive after the game if that's how your schedule works out. Like, I think 4:30 is great. I think that's going to be a great day in Blacksburg.
And then ODU, that's not in Blacksburg. That is, we're going to the dreaded Norfolk Stadium once more. 6 p.m. you said. And, like,
Yep.
I would rather that not be at nighttime.
Yeah, I don't love that. I don't love that at all. I think, though, you got to just get over it at some point, right?
You
For this
just
team,
have to go in and put the hammer down. Like,
yeah, you have to forget what time it is, forget where you're playing. Don't worry about if you're wearing orange, if you're wearing white, if you're wearing maroon, if they're wearing all sorts of powder blue and, like, whatever.
That powder
like,
blue. When I saw that last time, I didn't feel good about it. They
Like,
looked good in those uniforms.
You have to good teams, not even great teams. Like, good teams are able to not worry about those things. I think part of the maturation of not only, the new look program, but I think Brent Pry's a leader of the program, has to be getting over the time of the game and getting over the location of the game. We saw that a little bit towards the end of last season, where they started to play better on the road, like took care of Boston College, took care of UVA, played Tulane in a really gross atmosphere, took care of them. I think that Old Dominion game will be a really good test of, has this coaching staff figured out how to adapt to any situation they're given and get their guys ready to play.
Yeah, because I don't know if everyone listening remembers, but, like, there was a big question mark about this team playing on the road as recently as the BC game. Before we went up there and dealt them the hand that we did, where we just came out like gangbusters, we were playing terrible. And remember, like, the coaches had, like, woken them up at an early time or something and kind of messed with their clocks a little bit. Whatever they did worked, because I was listening to TSL from last Thursday, and Andy Bitter and Chris Coleman, they were saying, like, the Boston College game is probably the best win of our season. If you just look at the quality of the team, the fact that it was on the road, and the margin, like, that was the best. That was probably the best game, because the Tulane team wasn't the same team as they were throughout the year.
Yeah, and I think, excuse me, that Tulane game is, like, no team can really prepare for that. I don't think that helps one style or other. Like, that's just crazy. But you look at how they prepared for that Boston College game. You look at how they prepared for that UVA game, and UVA had just beaten a pretty good Duke team the week before. A lot of people forget that.
UVA had been playing better throughout the
UVA had been playing better, and it does seem like they figured out how to get the guys ready. And that's going to be a test this year. I mean, the Friday night game at Miami, road trip to Palo Alto, California, a weird trip to the House of Horrors, the new House of Horrors that is Ballard Stadium in Norfolk, Virginia, 11 a.m. kickoff.
And don't forget the old House of Horrors, the Carrier Dome.
Well, what I'll say about the Carrier Dome is that's for, like, you and me. Like, Kyron Drones wasn't alive when that was an issue.
I know.
So,
That's true. He was alive when we went up there in 2016 and got our butts kicked.
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
And so, even despite not being in the Big East anymore, and our first trip back in a while, and being 19-point favorites back in 2016, with our last, quarterback that got us all excited, it didn't go so well. So I've also heard some good stuff about Kyle McCord as of late. Like he shined in spring. Like, so like, Fran Brown got himself a quarterback, and we'll see. So we have 3 games already scheduled on ESPN, Sam. And this is something I brought up on Twitter today. It's the most games we have on ESPN, their mothership, not the U, not 2, not ACC Network, the mothership, ESPN, since 2018, when we also had 3 games. That same year, and keep in mind, 2018 wasn't a good year for us, but it was the previous 2 seasons had been good. And so we had 5 national TV games on the biggest networks. And then slowly but surely, we've been whittled down. In 2021, we had 1 game on those 2 networks combined. And so now we're back to 3, and that's a minimum. Like if we're good and Clemson's good, like maybe that game gets put on a main network. These are just the 3 that we know of. And I understand the knock that like, well, one's a Thursday nighter, that's always on ESPN, and one's Friday night. So of course, like we're playing weekday games. It's still national television. It's still on in every bar across America while people are out and drinking. Like it's a big deal to be on ESPN, like on in your own slot.
Yeah, and I think that Clemson game is for sure going to be on ESPN or ESPN2. Like I don't think ESPN's not going to push a Clemson game to the ACC network.
The one problem is if you look at that weekend, it's loaded with games.
What is that?
November 9th. So take a look, because I think Lindy's even highlighted that weekend, and we weren't even one of the games.
Well, Florida State Notre Dame will be on NBC, correct?
I think so, although all the contracts got mixed up. I think so.
Okay. I'm going to tell myself that game's on NBC.
Yes, I would assume so. But
I think it's great for hands. In this age where exposure is the number one name of the game. I think it's really good for tech, and I think it's good to, if they can prove to television networks that this is a brand that people nationally will tune into, it gives you a little bit more bargaining power in the next few off seasons.
There is no question that our administration, we've talked about how basketball might not have all the resources they need right now. Football does, and there's a reason for it. This is a last-ditch effort to have a seat at the table. That's why we're trying to get good as fast as we're getting good. Like this time period, this season, this is striking while the iron is hot, or maybe it was already hot. I don't know, but we need to be good right now if we want any leverage in any type of future negotiations with conferences or our own conference or whatever. So I agree with what you had to say there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the other thing is like whether or not the weekday games are, Ohio State and Alabama aren't playing on weekdays. I get that. But I still think the fact that we've been selected in 3 of those games and are the draw for a couple of those games at least gives the idea that like we are more desirable than we've been in several years.
Yeah, and I think it's part of Virginia Tech's brand too, has been weeknight games.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so there is this, like the Thursday night game against Syracuse last year. That was one that I watched from home, and ESPN really played into the nostalgia factor of that and how cool it was and how important, Virginia Tech playing on a Thursday night on ESPN, how important that was for ESPN when they were starting the Thursday night games, and how important it was for Virginia Tech. And I think continuing that, like Tech fans love it.
Yeah,
I think the players enjoy it.
Thursday night games.
Yeah,
like Friday night, take it or leave it, and that one's on the road. But like Thursday at home against Boston College, like
that place could be electric.
We'll pack that out. Like,
yeah,
it's going to be awesome.
And I think that's, again, exposure, brand, building all of that, and Thursday night is part of Virginia Tech's brand. A lot of programs, SEC, Big Ten, whatever, aren't selling that game out. Mm-hmm. They're just not. So I think it gives Tech a leg up on the competition in an era where they don't have a lot of legs up on the competition financially.
Yeah. So we're going to switch gears here, Sam. There was a rumor last week about a certain Big 12 team maybe jumping to the ACC.
Mm-hmm.
And that team was Utah. The Utah Utes potentially leaving the Big 12 to join the ACC. And this was all kind of rumor mill, but it got like caught by a bunch of different aggregators and was on various sites and whatnot. And it got people talking. Now, I think Utah denied any credence to it, but this is how these things start, right? Like you hear a rumor about something, you're like, oh yeah, that'll never happen. And then all of a sudden USC and UCLA are in the Big Ten,
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that this is going to happen, or like just because we heard this means it's going to. But let's just talk about Utah in general for a second. Both you and I love the Utes. I know Robbie loved the Utes. They're a fun program. They kind of, I think part of the reason we like them is because it's a Virginia Tech style of program. And they've had a long-time coach who's going to be a legend when he decides to retire there. He's already a legend. I would love to have Utah in the ACC.
It would be cool. I think it would definitely bring up the level of football in the conference. You would add a program that, if you look at the last decade, would be a top 3 program along with Florida State and Clemson. I think, unfortunately for the Big 12 in this move, and I think one of the reasons the ACC wouldn't look at them is they're not a big Olympic sport school. They're kind of just football. They'll sprinkle basketball here and there. I don't believe they have a baseball program. So they don't really fit the mold of an ACC school. However, like you said it, they are what Virginia Tech was in the heyday of Frank Beamer. Like, speed with a bunch of three-star track guys from high school, really physical brand of football. That stadium is crazy loud. It is really cool brand of football to watch. I have them as my Big 12 champ. I've already placed the bet. I love it. I think it would have been cool, but it didn't make a lot of sense. I will say, however, their AD came out a couple days later and strongly said, hey, we are committed to the Big 12.
Yeah,
now, one, coming out as an athletic director of a major state school to respond to a Twitter graphic made by a guy whose Avi is a beaver is interesting. And second, he also said the same thing about a week before they made the move to the Big 12. So
yeah. Now you cannot take, what is he supposed to say? They're under the TV contract right now with the Big 12. And this is just like a coach when they're like, coach, you're not going to leave for school X. Oh no, I love the school. I'll never go anywhere. And the next week the coach is gone. I mean, this is how these things go. If they could make more money in the ACC and it makes just a modicum of financial sense, they'll be in the ACC, because we've already now gone down the road of West Coast schools. If we didn't have a West Coast school in the conference, I'd probably be like, well, this is stupid. But we've already done stupid. We're doing it. We've got Stanford and Cal in the conference. We've got SMU in the conference.
I think it is much more likely, if you were to see the ACC, and this is ridiculous, if they were to try to expand, or more than likely try to backfill Florida State and Clemson, I think it would be much more likely that they try to take a team from the Southeast, like a App State, something like that, Tulane, maybe, I don't know, or they try to pick up Oregon State, Washington State to give themselves a little bit of West Coast flair, maybe add in if San Diego State or something wants to join. But to be honest, I don't see the ACC adding any more teams. It just doesn't financially make sense. The slices of the pie are getting comically thin right now.
Yeah. And if that's the thing, is if you could add a football power like Utah to a conference that hurts in football imagery, you would have to do it at this point, because it's a better ad than Stanford. It's a better ad than Cal, and it's a better ad than SMU if you're just talking about football, without a doubt. But anyway, we can move on from that. It's just a rumor. I hope it comes to fruition, because let's get nuts. We're already here. We're already nuts.
Like, what is it even? What are conferences even matter anymore? Like, that's Cal. I'm looking at this magazine. I'm like, I really don't care who's in what conference. None of them are going to play each other. So rarely, it doesn't matter.
Right? Well, that's something I want to talk about once again. Also, Sam, watch your there's just a little bit of interference, maybe like your hand around the mic or something like that. So just keep an eye out.
That might have been me flipping through.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. We always appreciate that. I thought it would be really cool if some conference, and one of these conferences has to do this, institute their own playoff, where, say you've got a 20-team conference, which we're darn close. Why not schedule 10 conference games, don't play a single out-of-conference game, and then do 2 or 3 rounds of playoffs, depending on how many. And that way, you're going to match up your best teams against each other at the end of the year to increase strength of schedule, especially for a weaker conference like the ACC or the Big 12. Like, that seems like a no-brainer to me. You want to make sure that your best teams get as many quality opponents as possible. So a mini playoff before the actual playoff would only be good. And so you leave the last 2 or 3 weeks unscheduled, and you basically have a loser's bracket and a winner's bracket.
I like that. I think it would be smaller than that, though. Like, what I could see them is leaving the last week of the season open and maybe pushing rivalry week to the week before. And then that way you almost guarantee that you're going to have some of the best games in the country, because the SEC is playing its cupcake week. A lot of ACC schools have started doing that as well, like Clemson and Florida State both. So that would make a little sense to me. And then you have that last week is you have like your 1 versus 4 and your 2 versus 3, and then conference championship week, you have your championship. That makes a little sense to me.
Yeah. I think it would just be fun, and it would not only would it increase schedule strength, resume, whatever, but it increases money. Like if you had a playoff in the ACC and you got an extra matchup of Miami and Florida State, or an extra matchup of Clemson and Virginia Tech, that would print money, both locally and on TV. So I just, that's something I've mentioned on Twitter a couple times, but like one of these conferences, the Big 12 was the originator, I believe. Maybe it was SEC, but whoever came up with the championship game idea, like someone had to come up with that. And now every conference does it. One of these conferences is going to have their own playoff, and then they're all going to do it.
I'll tell you what an idea I like the best is, and this is one that there's been a few versions of this, but the idea that I'm just going to call them mid-major now, like the group of 5, the mid-major conferences. If they took the winners of each of those conferences and had a like World Cup pool style tournament at the beginning of the next season for the first 3 weeks. So they all leave the first 3 weeks open, and you're playing, you'd get, Boise State versus Tulane, App State versus Memphis, the winner of the MAC, let's say like Toledo versus Liberty, something like that. They all play each other. So they each get 3 games. And you play it 3 points for a win, 0 points for a loss, point differentials, the tiebreaker. Like you can keep with
don't
they
do this in basketball? It's called like bracket busters, right?
They do have a college basketball has done similar things. The NBA had the play-in tournament this year.
True.
That was somewhat successful, but this
was a little weird, but yeah, it's somewhat successful.
This works really well in soccer. Like the carryover to the next year is one, it's a huge incentive for those programs to be good at football. And two, it adds a little, like, how many people were excited for App State versus Boise State being announced as a non-conference home and home?
That got announced this past week. Yeah.
That was huge. Way more people are going to watch that game than, I don't know, like Oklahoma State, Arizona. Who's excited for that game?
Yeah, no, I
not as many people.
I hear you. Yeah. No, it's kind of funny how like, you put 2 of those, or Illinois, Minnesota, like I would rather watch App State and Boise than Illinois, Minnesota. And I think a lot of fans would.
And think about it. If you have a 12-team playoff, some of those teams, 1 or maybe even 2, are going to be in that playoff. You'd much rather them have some tough non-conference games than not have any of them. So I think the conferences are going to have to get creative. My fear, though, is that these are some of the least creative people in the world right now, are like college athletic directors.
They have a history of not being very creative, although obviously we've gotten a lot better in the past 20 years or so, from the BCS to the playoff to where we are now with the 12-team playoff coming in. So
I think when we eventually leave the NCAA's model, I think you will start to see some stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, we kind of got a little off track there, but that's okay. I wanted to mention, we talked in our last episode about my top games. Me and Sam discussed the top ACC games of this upcoming season. And I put the article out. It's on Sons of Saturday now. You can go and read it. It's called Top 20 Tuesdays, Best ACC Football Games of 2024. And I just wanted to note a couple of these. Clemson and FSU did come in at number 1 for me. And I'm not going to go into too much detail. Go to the article, and there's a blurb and some information on each game. I put FSU and Miami 2. And I said that I was debating on that one or the Clemson FSU game. But VT Miami to me came in at number 3. And I'm sure maybe if any fans that aren't VT fans read that, be like, what are you putting Virginia Tech Miami as the third best game? You've got, NC State Clemson, Miami Louisville, but that game with Miami and Virginia Tech, with both potentially being undefeated in Hard Rock, in a city that loves the big. This is something that Andy Bitter said too. It's an event city. Like, people, they don't care about noon, but they care about Friday night at 7:30. Like, that game could be a sellout. Like, it could be very, very full.
It could. And I also think, again, back to like Virginia Tech on Thursday night, Virginia Tech Miami has this nostalgia factor that people nationally cling on to. Like, when that game is relevant, it catches national headlines. I think there's a much better chance of Virginia Tech being 4-0 than there is Miami at that point. Like, Miami has kind of a tricky schedule.
The beginning of the year is a little tricky for Miami, but
yeah,
once we get into our Lindy stuff, Sam, like, we got to talk about some of the Miami stuff, because like, that roster, I started to make me a little worried. Like, there's some stuff going on there.
No, they're good. I think that could be a really fun matchup, and you almost hope, like, I know you don't really want to root for Miami, but for the ACC,
no, I want the matchup, you want that to be attractive. Yeah. I want to. If I want to beat them, I want to beat them when they're 4-0. Like, I don't want any of it watered down. So, rooting for Miami is tough. But do I want them to be 4-0? I do, because I want to be 4-0 and I want to beat them. So let's talk just about where Lindy's had the top of the ACC. Projected order of finish: Florida State was number 1 for them, Clemson number 2, Miami number 3, NC State number 4, Louisville 5, Tech is 6, and SMU is number 7. So that top 7 is the same as your top 7, just not exactly in the same order, but the same 7 teams and pretty close. And for me as well, like, I think 2, 4, 7, those are the top 7 teams for me. SP plus, whatever. But they had VT at 6. You had VT at number 3. And so you were much higher on VT and a little bit lower on, what was it, NC State and Miami, I guess, were the ones that
I think if I'm looking at projected order of finish, I think that top 3 makes sense. And I think,
because yours was a power ranking, that was the nuance there.
There you go. And I think Louisville, NC State, Virginia Tech, I mean, Lindy's nationally has NC State 22, Louisville 28, Virginia Tech 29. I think 21 through 30 is basically the same team. Any of those teams could be ranked 21, any of them could be ranked 30, and I'd be like, yep, sounds pretty good. So projected ranking there, like, I think it's definitely more of groups. I think Florida State, Clemson, Miami, talent-wise, is a clear 1, 2, 3. And then I think you have behind that Virginia Tech, Louisville, NC State is your next 4, 5, 6. And then they have Carolina up at 33. And
one
SMU
spot
at
behind
32.
SMU. Yeah.
I found that interesting, because I don't think of Carolina as the 33rd best team in the country.
No.
I mean, SMU I could see at 32. I think that's fine and dandy, but I mean, this North Carolina team.
Tell me what about North Carolina? I mean, we had this discussion. Like, what about North Carolina can you hang your hat on? Because it's not the defense. It's not an overwhelming amount of talent. It's not the quarterback. It's not the head coach. Absolutely not the head coach. They lost Phil Longo 2 years ago. So I'm just like, 33.
Jeff Collins is your defensive coordinator. Like, Jeff Collins is going to fix it for you. I don't know about that.
Yeah, man.
I don't know about 33. Like, if I had to ballpark what sounds right, like 45 to 50 honestly sounds right, because this team will probably go 6, 7 wins.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like is right. And at Minnesota is going to be tough, but Charlotte, North Carolina Central, who knows what James Madison is going to look like? Just a complete program turnover.
Great. Yeah.
They get to play Duke, Pittsburgh, Virginia, Wake Forest, Boston College. Like, they have a favorable schedule.
Maybe that's why. Because like they're gonna.
I can see it, but I mean, this team lost to Virginia last year. They lost
They're
to Georgia
trending
Tech
down.
last
I mean,
year.
if just from I
Yeah.
try to be objective with a team I don't like in North Carolina, but like they are trending down. They have a geriatric head coach. They lost their juice on the recruiting trail. They still have talent in the program, but like what they were doing a few years back, that is long gone. And the point about Jeff Collins, I think, is so funny because former head coach of an ACC school, and you're going to sign up to be on Mac Brown's coaching staff when you know it could be over for him in 6 months. Like I don't know what
Yeah.
you're doing. That does not seem, and that indicates to me he maybe didn't have the best options.
Yeah, I think you could, from his point of view, I think you could see a head coach in waiting. Like you can kind of trick yourself with
Is that
that.
the play?
But I mean, if I'm going back to the rankings, if we're splitting the ACC into groups of 3 again, I think they're behind Georgia Tech and SMU. I think right now,
Definitely.
unless
I think so. The thing about
Yeah.
Georgia Tech is the schedule is just brutal. Lindy's had it as the number 5 hardest schedule in the country. Now, a couple of those are out of conference, but
I
yeah.
had a ranking the ACC schedules article ready to go.
Oh, nice.
In the website turnover, it got a little lost, so we'll have to type it up again. But I think they have by far the toughest schedule in the ACC, like by a mile. It's really, really.
They were the
brutal.
only ACC listed of the toughest schedules, and I think Lindy's ranked the top 15. So it is standing alone in terms of because they play Notre Dame and Georgia.
Their last 6 games are at UNC, neutral site versus Notre Dame, at Virginia Tech, Miami, NC State, at Georgia.
Oof. Ooh. That's at least they get that NC State, because that's that rubber match. If we're talking about ACC standings, like they get that one early, the UNC game.
Yeah, I think that could be Georgia Tech, NC State, November 21st. Last year, it was Miami, Louisville. And like that was the game that was going to determine who made it to Charlotte. Georgia Tech, NC State, that might be if NC State wins, they're in. If they lose, they're not game. I know they'll play UNC after that, I believe.
That's the thing about these teams that play the really tough schedule in Georgia Tech. Like Georgia Tech is going to have an impact on the ACC race because they're going to get somebody that they shouldn't get. And because Brent Key, I think, is a solid coach and they've got a little bit of talent. Like they're going to get somebody and they're going to affect the ACC race. It would be my guess for GT. But going back, go ahead.
Excuse me, but they could be 5-2 heading into that game against Notre Dame.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I mean that gives them a loss to Florida State and at Louisville, and wins against Georgia State, Syracuse, VMI, Duke, and Carolina.
Yeah, that's reasonable.
I can see it. I've also started to sell myself on Maryland, so maybe don't listen to me right now. Maybe don't listen to me right now.
Maryland is on the cover of my Lindy's because I'm on the East Coast here, and it's they can basically consider Notre Dame an East Coast school because of like all the Irish influence on this side. Yeah, you've got the good one. You've got Kyron. Yeah, I've got Maryland, I've got Rutgers, and I've got BC over here.
That's tough. We got Amari and Hampton running back for Carolina, who is very good. Yeah. Green for I think that's Green for West Virginia. West Virginia's quarterback,
Garrett Green.
Kyron. Yeah. I almost got the Florida cover at the airport in Jacksonville. Almost waited for that. But I had to get Kyron on there.
So the one last thing I wanted to mention just about rankings, we talked about Lindy's top 7 here, and I think it makes a lot of sense. And like you said, Louisville, VT, and SMU, they're within 4 spots of each other. And I guess if you want to add Carolina, they're within 5 spots of each other. Mm-hmm. So let's not say VT is for sure going to finish ahead of Carolina. I certainly hope so, and I certainly think so. But weird things can happen sometimes. But it's when you get into that level, I do feel more confident about Florida State, Clemson, Miami, and NC State. I think those teams, if gun to my head, those would be the top 4 teams in the ACC. So I agree with that. Did you see the FPI thing today about odds to win the ACC?
I don't believe I don't believe in FPI.
I know. As being a rankings guy who has your own formula for rankings, and we're both like, pro SP plus and pro a lot of other ranking systems. we were not in the top 5 of the ACC in percentages, and we were behind SMU, and NC State wasn't listed either.
Yeah. I think you have to separate what is a ranking based on a prior year and what is probably going to happen. Like, you have to separate the numbers from what's going to happen in reality. Yeah, we got Florida
This is
State,
janky as hell. I can't even do it.
Florida State in their spring game jerseys.
Yeah, they got the powder blues
Clemson.
on.
Yeah,
Clemson, Louisville, Miami, and SMU. SMU was 9% to win the ACC according to FPI, and Miami was 9.9, and then Louisville was third at 12%.
Yeah, FPI is not meant to do season-long projections. It is not meant to rank teams like in a national ranking. It is meant to
No, that's fair. Yeah.
give you historicals on a matchup, on a single matchup. And I think it's ESPN just like making a graphic, but FPI is not meant to predict the outcome of a season. Like, it's not that kind of model.
Yeah. You can do it. It's just like we were talking, me and Robbie were commenting on the fact that last year Syracuse came in at number 36 in the country preseason FPI, and it's like they are going to suck. Like, and they were terrible. And and I know Gatson got hurt and other stuff, but like, come on, there's a lot of flaws with FPI that you don't see as much with SP Plus, and a lot more being able to explain it away if you were to ask Bill about some of his rankings. But all right, let's take a quick second to talk about our sponsor, do a beer break, and we're going to come back with some player notes that Lindy's had on our players and rankings and whatnot. But the 2 Deep Hokies Under the Influence podcast is brought to you by Roback. Sam was on the links this past weekend, swinging a club, wearing his Roback. He looked good. It's on our Instagram and it's on our Twitter. We've got a code for you guys. It's 2 Deep VT. You can get 20% off your first order from Roback. If you want the shirt that Sam was wearing, the Commonwealth, you can get that. You can get the Berg, which is the quarter zip two-tone maroon. You can get the suits that they have for women or men. It's like, you get the matching top and bottom of their sweats, which are awesome. Joggers, shorts, quarter zips. Yeah, I mentioned that. And then tennis skirts. Anything that's for activity, that's what Roback is all about. Roback Crave Activity. That's what we talk about every week on this show. And you got to use code 2DVT for 20% off that order. I would say I had my Commonwealth on the week before on a super hot day in Philadelphia, and it breathes better than just about any polo I own.
I'm going to tell you, 18 holes in the middle of the day in Florida, and I felt great. It is, when they say performance wear, it is a piece of performance wear, and it is like incredibly stylish, but also really, really practical. Like, I felt better swinging a club in that than I do any other golf polo I have. And I have Nike, I have Adidas, I have the whole 9 yards.
So Sam, are you particular about your sizing when it comes to clothes? Do you hate when you get a shirt that's a little too big or a little too small or whatever?
I feel very uncomfortable in baggy clothes.
Yes.
So I need something that is going to fit, not tight, but like form fit, and maybe a little bit like heavier material, so it like sits how it does on a hanger.
So I'm going to give some advice to people buying Roback. If you are between sizes, you think you're a medium, but maybe like that could be a little big sometimes, or extra large, but maybe you could fit into a large. It's okay to size down. And if you go to the polos especially, might be a little bit big if you're a traditional large or whatever. So I would say they run a little bit bigger. And this is just a piece of advice. If you want to order, but you're holding back because like, I don't know what size I am, size down. That would be my advice. Like I have a shirt that I like. It might be a little bit bigger than I want, but I know like then I got the other size and it fits perfectly. And so that would be my advice. And they can take care of your returns as well. But use code 2DVT, load up your cart, go to roback.com and get one of those comfortable polos to hit the golf course with this summer. For right now, Sam, I need to know what you're drinking.
I am still working through that pack of Devil's Backbone IPAs. And in this one, I'm working on the Juicy Magic Juicy IPA. Ooh. It is juicy. This one's a 7%, so it's a little bit more on like the traditional alcohol level size. It is, in the best way possible, it's like the most basic juicy IPA. It tastes like orange, tropical, lemon, goes down easy. It's not super hoppy for an IPA, but it tastes good. It goes down easy. I really like it.
Let me see the color on that bad boy, or the on the beer. Yeah, there you go. Oh, that's pretty clear.
So it's not hazy at all.
Yeah.
It's not the. It is really, really drinkable. It's one of the more drinkable IPAs you get. So if you want a beer that tastes like a beer, that tastes a little bit like that orangey, that kind of like mandarin orange flavor that some of the juicies have, this is your beer. It's a good summertime IPA.
I like that, man. I want to try that one. I am drinking the Southern Tier Citra Fog. This was one, and you know, I was thinking before, I was like, did I have this on the podcast? I hate this question, so I'm rolling with it anyway. I don't think I did, because I checked our on tap score. It's not on there. Southern Tier makes a ton of good beer. It's a little bit mass produced for some people. Some people don't like the fact that like it's just everywhere and maybe puts a little too much sugar or lactose or whatever in their beers. During pumpkin season, the Pumpkin is a classic from Southern Tier, but this Citra Fog is one of the best ones I've had from them. It's a hazy IPA, 6% alcohol, nice and light. It's got kind of a half orange as the dot on the eye in Citra, and it's got a lighthouse on the back with 2 oranges as the lights. Cool. And so, in an orange can. So you're going to get a little orange flavor in there. That's that citrus flavor. But I love this beer. I had it for the first time in Philly because they have a deal with Victory where they will serve some Southern Tier beers on tap at the Victory downtown. They've got some kind of connection there. And then I had to buy a 6er because I do really like it. So the Citra Fog is something I would recommend for summer. This is a very, very solid IPA. And I will say Southern Tier comes correct on a lot of their beers. Like I rarely have a beer of theirs that I do not like. So Citra Fog, I would get that one.
Cheers.
Cheers, buddy. All right. So I want to ask you first. I went into some of these. They had graphics on the ACC, all different kinds of things. I'm going to put one up on the screen right now. And it has the top 7, just a refresher. And it also has the superlatives for the ACC. And this is a picture that I took on my phone and then put it on this graphic from the actual magazine. One of the funniest things about this, Sam, was the top one, which says most accurate passer. Can you read who that is?
Hank Bachmeier.
Hank Bachmeier from Wake Forest, formerly of Boise State and Louisiana Tech. He's been all over the place. The most accurate quarterback in the ACC is Hank Bachmeier?
No. I don't know if any of you have ever watched Hank Bachmeier play. I mean, last year he was 10-5 touchdown to interception at Louisiana Tech.
What was the completion percentage?
Completion percentage in 2023. It was 60. It was about 68.
Okay.
But
so that's what they're going off of.
But it was 68 of nothing. I mean, in 2022 he was 54%. That's when he got benched, which was the second time he's been benched at a mid-major. Mm-hmm. So he had a QBR of 41.4.
That's
last year at Louisiana Tech. Look, Hank Bachmeier has like everything about him should be a good quarterback, and then he gets on the field and he's not a good quarterback. Like, it is very frustrating. And I think I'm with you, dude. I don't know. I think Wake Forest is in some trouble this year. I think they get Donovan Green back at wide receiver. That's going to help them a lot.
Good player.
I think they return some guys, but Hank Bachmeier getting any sort of superlative after the last 2 years of his play.
If he's in the top 8, like in terms of completion percentage for a starting quarterback in the ACC this year, I will be shocked. Like, Kyron will absolutely have a better completion percentage than Hank Bachmeier. I can almost guarantee that. Cam Ward, absolutely. DJU, yes. Klubnik will probably have a better one. Like, that is like the silliest thing. They were just trying to spread some love, I think, because I just don't even get that. If you go to strongest arm, it's Cam Ward. And then we got one on there for Kyron, best scrambler.
Let's go.
Yeah, I like that. And I would agree, 172 yards in the bowl game. Come on now.
Yeah, and I think that's one of his attributes that we saw develop last year, and I think he definitely needs to take a step forward. And if you look at Kyron's advanced stats for passing, he has a lot of room for improvement.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things that he started to improve towards the end of the year was extending plays and not just running with the ball. And so I think for him, that'll be his best attribute this year is the scramble to throw, not necessarily scramble to run.
Yeah, and that's key. Extending plays with your legs, like a Patrick Mahomes-esque type thing, and getting the ball out and making a play when you maybe have no business making a play. That's where the rubber meets the roads with these quarterbacks. The guys who can do that become greats. Let's go to, so there's a couple other superlatives on here. No other Virginia Tech guys. Oh, wait, I'm wrong. Bashal Tutin, named as a special teams demon, according to Lindy's superlatives.
Yeah, I put him in there. I mean, when you have 2 kick returns for a touchdown in modern college football, that's a lot. Like, it's pretty rare to get one. So I think he's a guy who they're going to keep at kick return. I know it's risky, but they really like running backs returning, and he just has a talent for it. And I think projecting for him forward in his NFL career, I think that's going to be one of his attributes for a draft.
That's a selling point for sure.
Is kick return. So I think they're going to keep him there. He's going to do amazing. Coolest in the clutch, Grayson McCall. I mean, the dude's 26 years old. I hope he's cool in the clutch. Toughest to bring down Damian Martinez 100%. That dude is a bowling ball.
And I noticed that he was on first team All-ACC under running back with, who was the other All-ACC? Hampton. So it was him and Hampton, and then Tutin was on first team for the all-purpose back role. And so they basically had 3 running backs on first team, which they copped out with Tutin because they didn't rank him among the running backs. They ranked him among all-purpose, but that's fine. Tutin was the number 5 in the country all-purpose back, according to Lindy's. So that is pretty cool, but I don't want to he didn't get ranked among the ACC running backs when they actually did those rankings. And that's one thing I noticed about this, Sam. With 17 teams now in the ACC and 18 in the Big 12, these spots for All-ACC are loaded. Like in all these conferences, these positions are loaded. And if you look at the running backs, like Jaden Ott's on second team.
I think Jaden Ott's the best one.
That's what
Damian Martinez had
too.
He had 3 NFL offensive linemen on his team last year, like 3 guys who got drafted. So he's very, very good, but that's him. I mean, Omarion Hampton's playing on a wide open offense in North Carolina. Again, Omarion Hampton is very good, but Jaden Ott, dude, he's awesome.
And
you need to watch Jaden Ott on the ACC network.
Like, he reminds me, he kind of runs straight up almost, like a little bit. Who was the guy who ran for Oklahoma State? Then he went to the Rams. I'm totally blanking on him. Maybe 2 decades ago. But he ran really straight up. Oh, he was on Oregon State. Then he went to the Rams. Steven Jackson.
Yep.
And Jaden Ott is not as big as Steven Jackson, but he has that kind of upright style. And his frame is super athletic. And they just ran a highlight of him on Twitter where his first ever kick return was a touchdown for Cal. Like, the guy is just a monster. So he's on second team along with Phil Maffa. So that gives you an idea of the depth of the backs in the ACC, according to when he gets to running back. Wide receiver, I'd say the same thing, because none of our guys are even mentioned on first, second, or third team in the wide receiver category. And I think we have at least 3 amazing wide receivers that could make one of these teams.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised. I texted you about this today, but I'm kind of surprised Virginia Tech's wide receiver core isn't getting more hype this offseason. I understand
they're getting hype from us and the spring game coverage, but not nationally.
But I'm looking at this team Felton had a very good year statistically last year. Jalen Lane had a good year as a slot guy statistically. Gosnell did kind of his job as a committee wide receiver and coming back. But then you get to keep everybody and You're bringing back. I'm completely blank on Ali Jennings. Can't believe I blanked on his name.
Oh, we're drinking beer. It's okay, Sam.
Who was one of the top wide receiver transfers 2 years ago, played in a game, scored 2 touchdowns, and then broke his leg the next game. He's like a free agent ad for Virginia Tech this year.
Well, I think he was All-ACC preseason on some publications last year.
Yes, he was.
So
I think a lot of people are forgetting he's on the team.
I know.
So I think Virginia Tech's wide receiver core is being very, very underrated. That's just not me as a homer, but it makes sense. Like Restrepo for Miami is very good. Casey's Concepcion for NC State is really good.
He's a stud, yeah. Did you see the one blurb about our one wide receiver in these pages? It was kind of hard to find, but we got a blurb about an incoming freshman as the best sleeper of like the new guys on the team. And Brody, it was Keelan Adams. Yeah. Brody. Yes. We like to call him Brody. So yes, but he was, they kind of had a page about like the recruits, and he got mentioned as the top sleeper of the incoming guys, which is a pretty cool honor.
It would certainly be a sleeper. And I think that has nothing to do with Keelan Adams. I think it has to do with how deep this wide receiver room is. And if you think of the next guy up after that top 4 would be Aiden Green. So you're talking about the 6th guy on the pecking order on a team that likes to run the ball first.
Yeah.
But I mean, he could, as we saw last year, you're one injury away from being bumped up a spot. Yeah.
I'm fascinated to see what happens with the red shirting there, because with the depth we have at wideout, red shirting is warranted for him or Chans or both or whatever. They could grow in the system and come in ready to play as a redshirt freshman next year.
Yeah.
And they'll still get to play 4 games.
Like, I don't see Chans Wiggin getting in 5 games unless there's an injury or Tech is just blowing teams out. I just don't see it. They might redshirt just by default.
But we do have the question mark now with Holloway maybe being out for this entire season.
Yep.
That was one guy that you would consider to be in front of the freshman. Well, he might not be there. Yep. And Stephen Gosnell recovering from an injury. He might not be there. Like, it can happen really quick.
It could. And I say Virginia Tech a run first team. I still believe they will be that, but I would not be surprised if Kyron Drones is throwing the ball 30 plus times in some of these games. I would not be surprised, because Tech's strength is getting the ball to their wide receivers. Like, I think you look at some of their matchups last year against some better defensive lines, and the running the ball thing just didn't work. I even think like to the Marshall game, running the ball worked, and then it didn't, and then you tried to go back to it, and it's like, if you can develop a passing game, that opens up that running game a bit more, and that opens up your offense. Like, I would not be surprised if Tech tries to throw the ball a little bit more than we think they might this year.
Counterpoint is that every time we tried to throw the ball more than we ran, regardless of whether we were running well, it didn't go well. And in the Marshall game, I personally had a problem with the play calling. In the beginning of the Florida State game, we called like 6 of the first 9 plays were pass plays, and that got off to a terrible start.
That was bad. But I think Tech is going to be a much better passing team than they were in those games. So.
That's potentially true. And I absolutely understand that. And I think, but the other side to that would be, I think our O-line and where we're at, it's going to be a better run blocking group than pass blocking group.
Yeah. Yes. I think best case scenario is they are average at both. I think average at both would be great for this offense.
Because I think, because it wasn't just that we're good at running the football. We had a quarterback that they had to watch out for. We had a running back they had to watch out for. We did a lot of misdirection. And so it wasn't just that the O-line was playing better. The scheming got better as well towards the end of the year.
I think you can scheme around an offensive line not being great. You can't scheme around an offensive line not being bad.
Yeah.
But I think Tech will scheme around that. I think they will try to not run Kyron into the ground early.
And that is why I kind of believe in what you're saying, because it's twofold, right? If you pass the ball more, you get to utilize our wide receiving core more, and you don't get Kyron killed or Tootin killed. And so, like, that's kind of the double benefit there. Let's switch to defense real quick, Sam, because we need to talk about Dorian Strong here.
Mm-hmm.
He was the only other person on our team to make first team All-ACC in Lindy's. And he is the number 9 corner in the country, according to their magazine rankings.
I mean, it sounds right to me. I think,
and didn't he just release the clip of? I'm sorry, I interrupted you. The clip from the game where he's one of the top corners as well. I think he released I think Dorian posted a clip from like the top corners from NCAA 25, and he was one of them as well.
It wouldn't surprise me. I told you, I think he's the best NFL prospect on this team right now. He's really darn good. I mean, teams just don't throw it in. What is his? They posted. They didn't post. They wrote in here about his some stat about him. Let me see if I can find it.
Quick. You look for that real quick, because I was looking at the unit rankings, and in Lindy's they don't do the unit rankings for every team in the conference for every position like Athlon does. And when Athlon comes out, we're probably going to go over that, and Phil Steele, we might go over that as well. But they do rank the top 10 nationally of every position. And our Virginia Tech Hokies have the number 5 DB group in the country, according to Lindy's. We're the only position group to make a list. I thought maybe our running back room, depending on how they evaluate the quarterbacks, I thought that might happen. However, the Colin Schlee thing happened way too late to be included. So whatever. Number 5 DB group in the country. So that's awesome.
Yeah, and here's what they have at Dorian Strong, ranked number 9 in the country for Lindy's. 300 plus coverage snaps, less than 10 receptions, and 100 yards allowed.
Dang.
That's it. I mean, they're just not throwing at him.
Yeah,
and
that's impressive.
I think Dorian Strong, we might look back at Dorian Strong's career at Virginia Tech and be like, in a program filled with really good cornerbacks, statistically, he might have one of the more dominant ones.
And what's great about this, Sam, is when I used to get the Phil Steele magazines or the Athlon magazines 10 years ago, and I look at the unit rankings, our DB group would always be top 10. If it wasn't top 10, it was like, okay, they made a mistake. To be back in the top 10 in the DB group, like that is Virginia Tech, and that is very, very cool.
It's just nice to be included. You know, like I think for the last 4 or 5 years, it felt like Virginia Tech just wasn't a part of the preseason discussion at all. Like there was just another team for them to fill out. And now you're seeing it. It's maybe not to the level that I think a lot of Virginia Tech fans think, but starting to feel like nationally people are picking up on Virginia Tech football again. I think that as a fan, that's really awesome to see.
I want to go through our schedule and where the teams come in at in the rankings. But first, let's just double back to Kyron quickly, because I forgot to mention he was the number 24 quarterback in the country, according to their QB rankings. And if you look at who's ahead of him in the ACC, there's actually a number of ACC quarterbacks they have up there. Cam Ward was number 8. McCall was number 13, Preston Stone 21, DJU at 22, and then Kyron 2 spots behind DJU at 24. So you've got 5 quarterbacks from the ACC in the top 25. That's a pretty nice number for our conference.
Just behind Nico Iamaleva, who has played like 1 game. I think he played the bowl game for Tennessee last year.
And is a much hyped recruit. Very much hyped.
Very much hyped. Great volleyball player too. His volleyball highlights are insane.
Is that for real?
Yeah, he was like a D1 outside.
Is he a Hawaii guy?
He's from Southern California, but he's Hawaii. He's got that Polynesian bounce to him.
Got it. But yeah, I thought that was a very favorable ranking for Kyron. Not because I don't believe he's a top 25 quarterback in the country, but you talked about some of his advanced stats passing the ball and like maybe some of the deficiencies there. They're making a projection on Kyron, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think you kind of have to. If you look at the situation he was thrown into, and you look at he's a guy who didn't really play at Baylor the year before, and he started to impact the game in so many ways towards the end of the season, like as a runner, as a thrower, as like a game manager in some of those games as well. I think it's fair if I'm looking at guys ahead of him, like I think Will Howard is going to have the stats playing at Ohio State, but after seeing Will Howard for a bit, like I don't think Will Howard's that much better than him.
It's. Do you think it's kind of funny that Ohio State is hinging the most talent accumulated ever on Will Howard at quarterback? Like they should have gone out and gotten Dylan Gabriel or something. Like I just don't
Cleveland
really.
sports Twitter would agree with you. I'll tell you that. I think it is. That team is going to run the ball so much, though.
Yeah,
like they are just going to hand the ball off to Henderson, and then they're going to hand it off to Judkins. They're going to hand it off to some other 5-star who's sitting on their bench. Ohio State's offensive line, though, isn't that good. Will Howard can run. I think I have a bad feeling about Ohio State. I have a bad feeling. Winning the offseason sometimes isn't a good thing.
True, but like bad feeling means they still make the playoff, though.
Bad feeling, like 10-2, win the Big Ten. You know,
they got to win the Big Ten.
Yeah, it is.
They got to beat Michigan this year. Otherwise, there's going to be hell to pay for their head coach.
Yeah.
So we talked about Kyron now. We've kind of moved our way through. John Love made second team, All-ACC. APR and Lawson made third team. Lawson made third team.
I mean, he's the kind of like Kyron, where it's like if you watched the highlights and you look at the raw stats, he had a good season. But then if you look at like PFF, hated Kelly Lawson. Yeah. I think you also had some moments where you're like, dude, where you are actually running away from the ball. So potential there. Like if he's in the right spot, he's a really good linebacker. It's just getting him in the right spot.
Did you hear the murmurs about, obviously he was banged up for spring and didn't play. There's like a little bit of talk that he was hurt like maybe for a better part of the season.
I think so. I think Tech had a few guys defensively that were hurt for pretty much the whole season. Keontae Jenkins is another guy I think was hurt pretty much for like Jenkins, Stroman. They were all hurt from like day one, I think, or close to day one.
And so you hope maybe if that gets corrected, because in the beginning of the season, I think there was a little bit more speed and athleticism from Lawson than we saw later in the season. And that could just be my own personal anecdotal thought, but I want to have one of our linebacker coaches on this show. I kind of reached out to some people we know to see if we may be able to get a coach on here. And I want to ask him a little bit about that type of thing when it comes to Lawson, because he was on the freaks list. He has all these tools. He's made a couple of these various lists in terms of maybe a draft prospect and All-ACC. What can we expect from Lawson? And that's something I want to discuss with one of our actual coaches. And we're hoping to bring that to you in the next couple episodes this summer. Let's talk about the ACC. UVA, I think, second to last team, my last team. They're number 11, according to Lindy's, in the ACC. Stanford was last, and that's who you had last, so that jives. But number 11, they're taking what UVA did at the end of last year and saying it's going to continue a little bit here.
What did they do at the end of last year?
They started playing better when they beat UNC. They didn't get a lot of wins, but they were much more, because they almost beat Miami, right? Like
that sounded really like condescending. I was genuinely asking, like, what did they do last year? Now I'm looking at it.
Well, they nearly they played
game.
so bad at the beginning of the year. They looked lifeless. And then they beat UNC and they almost beat Louisville. Do you remember that one?
Well, I mean, they had a 3-point loss to NC State. They had a 3-point loss to Boston College, a 3-point loss to Miami, 7-point loss to Louisville. They were competitive in all of those games. They were. My fear for them is they didn't get any better. They actually got worse.
They did pick up some nice pieces in the portal. Just a couple. Chris Tyree among others.
Chris Tyree.
Hey, look, I'm not trying to make the case for UVA. I'm just saying, like they got better last year. They did, and that's what made our performance against them all the more impressive, in my opinion.
They did. I don't think they're better than Cal, for sure. But I think Cal's a better team.
No,
I understand. I understand the thought process with UVA. I think they will be a better team. I just don't know if. I don't know how much better. Like,
are we talking better than UNC, or are we talking better than Wake, Stanford, BC? You know, like that's the question.
I look at their schedule. Richmond is Richmond. At Wake Forest, sure, I think they can beat Wake Forest. Maryland's going to be tough. Maryland spanked them last year. I think Maryland's probably going to spank them again this year. Coastal Carolina won't be too great. Boston College. But then you got Louisville, Clemson, North Carolina. You got to go to Pittsburgh, which is never fun. You got to go to Notre Dame. Then you got SMU. Then you got at Virginia Tech.
Yeah, it's tough, man. They're
making a bowl is, I think, a little bit out of reach.
What all we're trying to decipher here is, like, are they, like, I don't think they're going to be the 11th best team in the ACC standings or power rankings. Like, I think they're probably going to be 14, 15, 16, 17. That's what I would guess. Lindy's is a little bit higher on them.
2-6 in conference sounds right, for honestly. Yeah.
So we did talk about GT's toughest schedule. The toughest schedule in the conference: Florida State, Louisville, Notre Dame, Miami, NC State, Georgia. That's a rough half of your schedule right there.
That's brutal.
So let's go to our schedule. Vanderbilt, number 67 in the Lindy's rankings. Marshall, 103. ODU, 117. Rutgers, 46. Miami, 17. Stanford, 75. BC, 63. GT, 42. Syracuse, 56. Clemson, 14. Duke, 70. And Virginia, 58. That's a lot of numbers. But let me put it to you this way. 5 teams that I just named on our schedule are in the bottom half of FBS. And I'm including number 67 because we have 134 teams. So I'm going with Vandy's number 67 there. I'm going to include them in the bottom half. Mm-hmm. But that's 5 of our games are against the bottom half. And then just 4 teams that we play are in the top 50, according to Lindy's.
Yeah, I think it's a favorable schedule any way you slice it. You know, I think Old Dominion is a team that has given Tech issues, of course, but they are really struggling to find continuity with their roster. I think that showed last year. They had a lot of new pieces early in the season, and they played better towards the end of the year, but again, flipped around. They lost a lot of those guys. We'll see what they look like.
What is it about ODU where they have to flip half of their roster every year? I know they're G5, like I get that, and you're going to get pilfered a little bit, but like 117 again for them. And you're right. Most of it is because there's so much unknown.
Yeah. And I just don't know if they are, I don't think they're bringing in guys who really elevate that roster, especially in the Sun Belt, which is very difficult. Is probably the best mid-major G5 conference. I mean, a guy they did bring in. Do you know who they did bring in this offseason from Virginia Tech?
Who?
They brought in Bryce Duke, right?
Oh, that is a nice pickup for them. Wow.
So that'll be interesting.
Yeah.
I think he'll look great in that uniform, and I think he could help them out. But I just don't know if they're bringing in the talent from the transfer portal to help them replace what they're losing. I don't think they have enough time to like mesh things together. I think they're just kind of, the wheels are spinning for ODU a bit. I think they'll give Tech trouble in that game for sure.
Is Duke gonna be their top running back? I feel like he probably should be. I don't know. They usually have a good back or two on the roster, but
they
he's
a
guy
good
last
player,
year,
who was like a big time JUCO guy. He went to Ole Miss for a bit.
Yeah,
yeah.
But
yeah, they had Devin Roche.
To be clear, ODU is the lowest ranked team in Lindy's on our schedule next year at 117.
Jason Henderson is still there.
No.
Yes, he is.
How is he not how was he not drafted this year? Like I thought for sure he'd be a 3rd or 4th round draft pick.
Anyway, let's move on. I don't want to.
Yeah. Anyway, ODU, lowest ranked team on
Mhm.
the schedule. We must go to Norfolk and we must beat them by 2 TDs, 3 TDs, 4 TDs. Like
Yep.
that has got to happen. We must do that. Marshall, 2nd lowest ranked team on the schedule, 103. Cam Francher's gone. Do they still have the running back or is he gone as well? Yeah, he's gone. So we're going to do our game previews where we do the first half of the schedule and the second half of the schedule. When we get into July, we will bring you those previews. But for right now, we're kind of flying by the seat of our pants when it comes to these teams and going off our Lindy's rankings. But Marshall at home, 103 in the country, got to win that game. Must put the beat down.
That's a bridge game. We'll talk about that later, but that's a bridge game.
Rutgers at 46, I feel like that's one of the 4 top 50 teams. They're bringing back a lot of people, but they're not bringing back their quarterback, which he was not a good college quarterback. But against us, I felt like I would much rather play against the guy they're going to run out there this year than Wimsat, who they ran out there last year.
Yeah, so they're gonna run with Ethan Kalakamanis, who was the quarterback from Minnesota for a few years. And Minnesota did this transition to like an air raid offense last year, and it didn't really work. Kalakamanis, got to get that right.
Kalika Kamanis?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just teasing you.
He's not bad, but I would much rather play him than Wimsat. I think Rutgers as a matchup was really tough for Virginia Tech last year and where they were as a defense. Kalakamanis is not the running threat. He's much more of a pocket passer. I don't know if this team has the weapons on the outside that stare you. The running back there, Monangai, is still there.
Yeah, he's good, very good running back. Very good.
He's good. That defense is going to be nasty again.
They're going to test our tackling ability, much like, remember the kid from Purdue that ran all over us? Because the Rutgers running back and the Purdue running back both ran all over us. But they kept talking
about... And the Marshall
running back. And the
Old Dominion quarterback.
Oh, yeah. And he's back. Grant Wilson is back.
Yeah, Grant Wilson's back.
But the car mechanic from Purdue was the one that really got me because they kept talking about him. And then they kept saying like how he's breaking all these tackles. And it was true. Like he was like going berserk anytime anyone touched him. Yeah. That is the type of thing that when we face Rutgers and this running back, we have to be absolutely sure tackling because that is going to make a huge difference in that game.
Yeah, and you looked at the Rutgers last year, they graded out really poorly, and it was because when they played teams who could tackle, who could play sound football in the defensive front seven, they got their butts whooped. Yeah. So I think that's really the key to playing Rutgers. Sound tackling in defensive front seven, you're going to take care of them.
Yeah. So the only other teams in the top 50 are Georgia Tech, Clemson, and Miami. And we know Clemson and Miami, what those matchups are going to be. They're our 2 biggest matchups of the year. But Georgia Tech being 42, I think we are going to benefit from them having such a tough schedule. They may be a little beat up. Like that's what we need to count a little bit on with them because they came back on us by 11 points 2 years ago to win that game. And that was a really bad circumstance, and we got to make sure we take care of Georgia Tech this year. That's a very winnable game that we need to get that dub.
Tech will have an extra couple days off. That's the week after the Boston College Thursday night game.
True.
The week before that for Georgia Tech, they play Notre Dame in Atlanta. And another thing I would look at for Georgia Tech, I think they are going to be a decent team this year. They lost to Bowling Green and Boston College last year. Neither of those teams were very good. So I think Georgia Tech is a very up and down team. I don't see them coming to Blacksburg after that Notre Dame game and playing very well. So I think Tech gets them. That's a scheduling W for Virginia Tech. And I think the best scheduling W of the season for them.
Yeah, you're right. And the other thing about that matchup with Haynes King at quarterback for them, it's our strength is our DBs. It's our corners. I think it's that alone right there because he's a good quarterback. It's a favorable matchup because it's a little bit of strength on strength for our defense. So that's about all I've got here, Sam. Do you have any last notes from the magazine before maybe you have a a mystery Hokie for me?
Yeah, I do. One thing I'll say is Lindy's, it aesthetically is a really pleasing magazine.
It's a good magazine, yeah.
I think they do a really good job of making it like fun to look at. Each team has the national. I just open up to a random page. You have the national ranking up there. Easy to read. Little blurbs about each team. I think they do a great job for it. So Lindy's is one that I think you definitely need to pick up. I think Lindy's does the best aesthetically, and I think Athlon probably does the best job of actually teaching you about every team. So those are my two. And I will say support these guys who work really hard on these magazines. There's a lot of work that goes into
And
these.
this magazine's only $12. Like mine says $11.99 on the cover. So like that's a pretty decent price. I know Phil charges a little bit more. He's got a little bit more of a name out there, Phil Steele. I stopped buying Phil Steele a couple years ago because I just felt like so much of their information was repeated. But I know this about Phil Steele. He works extremely hard on that magazine. We interviewed one of the guys from his staff several years back on our podcast. And I do worry about the quality of all of these magazines except for his, because I know that he's still putting the same work into it and it comes out later. So it factors in a lot of things that have happened. Athlon and Lindy's go to print so early that sometimes they are missing information. And Godfrey talked about this on Split Zone Duo that like he does a lot of those write-ups of the anonymous coaches for Athlon. Like he did it again this year. And he said like, expect the thinnest Athlon magazine you've gotten in years. And when they wanted it to go to print, they couldn't possibly have had all the necessary information. So that's just something like, listen, no magazine's going to be perfect. Nothing's going to cover every single aspect. But I thought that was interesting perspective in that because of the transfer portal, because of NIL, everything else, like it just makes these projections that much harder. Like, and when they go to press in June, like that's usually it started in late March and like it just, they can't get everything right.
Yeah, I'd agree. It's a tough job. But I think support them. They're really good information. It's a great reference throughout the year, especially
I look at these magazines all season long. Like absolutely.
I did one quick skim of it this weekend, and then we're gonna go back and like really read it. We're gonna have notes. We're gonna highlight all that stuff. The drive to 25 units.
Are you
what I'm calling this year?
Dude, that's good. Drive for 25.
Drive to 25 units. It starts. This is where it starts, people. I'm telling you.
Do you do the Post-its? Like, will you like? Because there are years where like my Athlon is like covered in Post-it notes for like all the various pages.
Yeah, I'm a big Post-it note guy. Color coordinated highlighting and pens. They got to have a few tears in them. Like you got to get that one. That first tear kind of hurts, but the second one feels good. Some pool water stains here and there.
Yeah, because you're on the beach with it. You got some sand in the creases there.
I straight up dropped my Lindy's magazine in the pool last year. I'm not gonna lie. That's part of the fun of it.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I love reading a Phil Steele or an Athlon on the beach, man. Like that's part of the fun. Absolutely.
I love it in airports.
Yeah. Yeah.
Love it.
That's where you were enjoying yours, right?
That's where I was enjoying mine. It was great. It was a great day. I enjoyed my 4 hours in the Jacksonville airport.
Oh, man. All right. So what do you got for me, Sam?
Random Hokie of the day. I keep forgetting to put these out on Twitter, but we'll do that next week. So I'll tell you the years they played, some broad stats about them, a fun fact, and their best game. And these are all Hokies post 2000. So this Hokie played for 4 seasons at Virginia Tech, accumulated 2,884 yards of total offense and 18 touchdowns, or 19 total touchdowns, 19 total touchdowns. This player, their best game came against NC State, where they had 164 total yards of offense and a touchdown. They played for the Green Bay Packers for 3 seasons. And in one of those seasons had 681 yards of offense. So did something in the NFL for a couple years.
Yeah, Green Bay, huh?
A 4-year contributor at Virginia Tech. Freshman, sophomore, junior, senior contributor for Virginia Tech's offense.
All right. So the first thing I need to account for here is was he a wide receiver or a running back or a quarterback? Like clearly this is an offensive player. Scored 19 touchdowns, 164 yards against NC State.
Another hint maybe for like I could have picked 5 or 6 games for like their best game.
Okay.
That was their most total yards in a game. But I could have picked there were some good options for best game.
Antonio Freeman?
Packers. No, post 2000.
Okay, because
but Green Bay Packer.
I know he played for Green Bay. So yeah, and listen, he played Antonio Freeman had an amazing career for Green Bay, so that's not the right answer because this guy only had 600 yards for Green Bay. All right, give me the clue of whether it's what position they played.
Wide receiver.
As a wide receiver. All right.
I will also say this player had another great game of theirs was against Miami where they had 120 yards receiving and a touchdown.
All I'm doing is trying to think of the wide receivers that played for us that would have played for Green Bay.
Yeah.
Because David Clowney was a Jet. Eddie Royal never played for Green Bay. Andre Davis was a Cleveland Brown. Did he play for Green Bay? He was. That's not Andre Davis. Jared Boykin. Yes.
Congratulations.
That's because he did have an NFL career. I do remember that, but it wasn't like some ballyhooed career. But it finally came to me. It clicked for a second there.
Yeah, I mean, this guy too, in his junior and senior years, had 6 games over 100 yards receiving. When Tech he was not throwing the ball that much. So good.
What was the number one thing that they mentioned about Jared Boykin on the broadcast, Sam?
Athletic. Was he the like athletic freak guy or big hands? Like
big hands,
huge hands.
Big hands. Yep. That's the one. He had like 4XL gloves or something.
I think he's also the guy where he just ate like McDonald's in fast food and like McDonald's and Hardee's, and he lifted in the group with the offensive lineman because he was such a freak. Like he was well in the 1,000 club in the gym. Like
there was a number
crazy.
There's a funny story about Jared Boykin where I think one of his first games was against Furman, and he got tackled by one of the kids from Two-A-Days. Do you remember the show Two-A-Days on MTV where they followed the Hoover football team? Well, Boykin got tackled by that kid from the Hoover show, and he like talked to the reporters about it after the game. He was like, "That was really cool. I got tackled by the kid from Two-A-Days."
Yeah, but so we've had Anton Exum, we have had
Darren Evans,
and we have had Jared Boykin.
3 great Hokies, absolutely.
3 great Hokies. I'll tell you, like that 2008 to 2012 span is just stacked with names.
It is. It really is
stacked. So
we were recruiting at a high level, and we won ACC titles. And that's one thing about Dwayne Brown and Tyrod Taylor going into the Hall of Fame. Dwayne won 2 ACC titles in his 4 years. Tyrod won 3 ACC titles in his 4 years. So accomplished. So another congratulations to those guys.
Yep.
All right, that's going to do it for the podcast. Make sure you hit us on Twitter. It's @2DeepVT, @2DeepVT on Instagram. Make sure you rate us on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts. I know most people are listening on Apple Podcasts, but if you're on Spotify, we could use your reviews.
Yes, leave a written review on Apple Podcasts. That is huge for like how they bump it up.
Nice.
On Apple Podcasts. Yep.
Yeah, we could use rate, review, subscribe. That's the number one thing. Like the video on YouTube, all the rest of it. And until next time, Go Hokies.
Go Hokies.